September 12, 1944, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics, Berlin. Dr. Heinrich Vulkman stood frozen before the decoded papers spread across his desk. The intercepted American intelligence report in his hands trembled slightly, not from the autumn chill that crept through the Institute's stone halls, but from the realization of what he was reading. For 3 years, Vulkman had led Germany's Uranverein, the Uranium Club, under the unshakable belief that his nation stood at the forefront of atomic science. It was German minds, after all, that had first split the uranium atom in 1938. Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann had made that breakthrough right here in Berlin, ushering in the age of nuclear physics. But the morning's revelation shattered that pride. At 0630 hours, the Institute's intelligence liaison delivered a decoded transmission intercepted from Los Alamos, New Mexico. It confirmed what German scientists had thought impossible: the Americans were no longer theorizing about atomic weapons, they were building them, and were mere months from completion. The message detailed vast facilities, entire secret cities, hidden within the United States. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, employed more than 75,000 workers in an installation larger than many of Germany's own industrial centers. Hanford, Washington, stretched across 586 square miles and housed functioning plutonium reactors, something Vulkman's team had only ever discussed in theoretical papers. Dr. Klaus Riedel, Vulkman's deputy and a former student of Max Planck, studied the intercepted schematics in silence. The Americans had solved technical barriers that had stalled German research for years. Their gaseous diffusion plants operated at industrial scales, processing uranium by the ton, while German facilities were still at the bench test stage. The blow to German scientific confidence was devastating. These were men who saw themselves as the rightful heirs of Einstein, Planck, and Heisenberg, the founders of quantum theory. Yet the Americans, once considered scientifically inferior, had achieved what the Reich's finest minds deemed impossible. Professor Werner Heisenberg himself had assured Nazi leadership that an atomic bomb remained decades away. His calculations, presented just 6 months earlier, concluded that such a weapon would require uranium enrichment plants the size of entire cities, an absurd notion, he claimed, given wartime constraints. Now, staring at the decoded documents, Vulkman realized the Americans had built those very cities. Even more alarming was the revelation that the U.S. wasn't relying on a single method. They had pursued multiple routes, both uranium enrichment and plutonium production, investing resources that dwarfed the entire German war economy. It hadn't always been this way. When Germany's nuclear program began in 1939, it had every advantage: the world's leading physicists, abundant uranium from Czechoslovakia, and near-limitless funding. The Reich Research Council classified atomic development as Kriegsentscheidend, decisive for victory. But from the start, the program was crippled by political rivalry and bureaucratic chaos. Competing institutions, the Reich Research Council, the SS Ahnenerbe, the Luftwaffe's Technical Office, and the Navy's Research Branch, all launched their own atomic efforts, each hoarding resources and information. Now, in the dim light of the Berlin laboratory, Vulkman finally understood the full cost of that disunity. While Germany's brightest minds fought one another, America had quietly united science, industry, and military power behind a single, secret goal. And in doing so, they had already built the weapon that would end the war. September 12, 1944, Berlin, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics ***. Dr. Heinrich Vulkman's eyes moved slowly across the final page of the intercepted American report. Every new paragraph deepened his sense of disbelief. The document laid bare not only how far behind Germany's atomic program had fallen, but why. The first and most fatal error had been rivalry. Within Germany's scientific establishment, competition had replaced cooperation. Dr. Kurt Diener, a brilliant but ruthless physicist and SS Oberfuhrer, operated his own program in direct opposition to Heisenberg's team at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Their feud crippled progress. Instead of sharing discoveries, both groups guarded their results like state secrets, splitting Germany's already limited uranium supply and duplicating critical experiments. Across the Atlantic, the Americans had done the opposite. Under the unified command of General Leslie Groves, scientists at Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford worked together toward a single goal. In Germany, every breakthrough was a personal fiefdom. In America, it was a collective mission. The second major failure was strategic short-sightedness. Nazi leadership, convinced of a swift victory through conventional warfare, refused to invest in projects that would take more than 2 years to complete. In 1940, Reich Minister Fritz Todt had informed atomic researchers that any long-term weapons research would receive minimal funding. That single directive doomed Germany's atomic ambitions before they truly began. Professor Paul Hartek at the University of Hamburg had proposed gaseous diffusion, the very method later perfected by the Americans at Oak Ridge. His plans were dismissed as too costly and speculative. The Reich Ministry of Education granted him a budget smaller than what the United States spent on the Los Alamos cafeteria each month. Meanwhile, the war itself was devouring German science. Allied bombing raids systematically targeted research centers. The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute was struck 3 times in 1943, destroying 2 years of experimental data and forcing surviving teams to scatter across the countryside. Equipment was scarce, funding erratic, and skilled labor diverted to tank and aircraft factories. But the most devastating loss was human. From 1933 onward, the Nazi regime had expelled, imprisoned, or driven into exile many of Germany's brightest minds: Einstein, Szilard, Fermi, and countless others. Those very refugees were now working for the Manhattan Project. What had once been Germany's intellectual arsenal had become America's greatest weapon. By 1942, German atomic research had stagnated. Heisenberg's team achieved small-scale nuclear reactions in laboratory piles, but scaling them to weapon-grade production required an industrial base Germany no longer possessed. In contrast, the United States had moved beyond theory. The Intercepted report described how America's transformation began in December 1942, when Dr. Enrico Fermi, the Italian physicist who had fled Mussolini's racial laws, achieved the first controlled nuclear chain reaction in a Chicago basement. That milestone marked the beginning of a new era, the shift from theory to production. Within months, under General Groves' direction, the United States turned atomic research into the largest scientific industrial effort in human history. By mid-1944, 3 massive secret facilities were operational. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, had perfected uranium enrichment using multiple methods. The K-25 gaseous diffusion plant alone covered 44 acres under a single roof and consumed more electricity than several American cities combined. At WWII, vast electromagnetic calatrons, a concept German scientists had dismissed as impractical, were successfully separating uranium isotopes on an industrial scale. Hanford, Washington, was already producing plutonium in quantities that Germany's fragmented program couldn't begin to match. As Vulkman read the final lines of the intelligence summary, the truth became undeniable. Germany's scientists had once believed they led the world. But by 1944, the race for the atom was already over, and the Americans had won it. Most shocking to German researchers was the scale. Oak Ridge employed more physicists than existed in all of occupied Europe. Dr. Robert Oppenheimer's leadership at Los Alamos represented everything German atomic research lacked. While German scientists competed in bureaucratic rivalries, Oppenheimer had unified America's brightest minds under military discipline and unlimited resources. The intercepted documents described a scientific city where theoretical physicists worked alongside explosive experts, metallurgists collaborated with electronic specialists, and pure research transformed into engineering solutions. Within weeks, the American approach to plutonium production revealed industrial thinking that German scientists had never imagined. At Hanford, Washington, DuPont Corporation had constructed production reactors using techniques borrowed from chemical manufacturing. While German researchers debated reactor theory, Americans had built machines that produced weapons-grade plutonium by the kilogram. Professor Niels Bohr's defection to America in 1943 had provided the Manhattan Project with crucial theoretical insights that accelerated weapons design. Bohr, who had mentored an entire generation of European physicists, now advised American bomb designers on critical mass calculations and assembly mechanisms that remained mysteries to German researchers. The intelligence revealed American innovations that challenged fundamental German assumptions about atomic weapons. Critical mass requirements previously estimated by German scientists at several tons of uranium had been reduced to manageable quantities through sophisticated implosion techniques. The Americans had solved weapons assembly problems using conventional explosive expertise that Germany's fragmented research programs couldn't access. Most devastating was the discovery that America pursued multiple bomb designs simultaneously. While German scientists debated whether uranium or plutonium offered better prospects, the Americans had developed both pathways to operational weapons. The Little Boy uranium design and Fat Man plutonium implosion bomb represented parallel innovations that guaranteed American success regardless of technical challenges. The intelligence communications revealed testing schedules that confirmed German fears. Trinity, the code name for America's first atomic test, was planned for July 1945 in the New Mexican desert. After 3 years of theoretical discussions, German scientists realized their enemies would demonstrate functional atomic weapons within months. Dr. Vulkman understood that German atomic research had fundamentally misunderstood the challenge. While German scientists approached atomic weapons as theoretical physics problems requiring elegant solutions, Americans had treated bomb development as an engineering challenge requiring industrial solutions. This philosophical difference had determined the outcome before German researchers recognized the competition had begun. July 16, 1945, 0529 hours. The Trinity test in the Alamogordo Desert confirmed every German scientist's worst fears. The intercepted American communications, decoded by German intelligence 3 days later, described a fireball that rose 38,000 feet into the New Mexican sky and created a crater 1,200 feet wide. The theoretical had become devastatingly real. Dr. Vulkman received the Trinity report while German atomic researchers gathered for their final wartime conference at Statham. The timing was cruelly ironic as German physicists debated whether atomic weapons remained theoretically possible. American scientists had just proven their practicality with a blast August 1945, the end of Germany's atomic illusion. The intercepted reports on the American atomic tests landed on Dr. Heinrich Vulkman's desk like a death sentence for German science. What they described was beyond anything Germany's physicists had imagined possible. The explosion the Americans had achieved in New Mexico was equivalent to 21,000 tons of TNT, a level of destructive power that defied all known calculations. For years, Germany's intelligence network had been efficient at intercepting Allied communications, yet it had utterly failed to grasp the full magnitude of the Manhattan Project. Colonel Erwin Respond, head of German scientific intelligence, had repeatedly dismissed earlier reports about Oak Ridge and Hanford as deliberate Allied deception, disinformation meant to lure Germany into wasting resources on fantasy weapons. That misjudgment would haunt him for the rest of his life. At the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, Nobel laureate Professor Max von Laue, Vulkman's senior advisor, examined the data from the American Trinity test with growing dread. The calculations were undeniable. The Americans had achieved nuclear fission efficiency that German theory had declared impossible. What German physicists believed would require tons of uranium had been made feasible through implosion techniques they had never even considered. The intelligence files described a level of engineering sophistication that stunned the German scientific community. The Fat Man bomb, the plutonium device dropped on Nagasaki, weighed 10,800 pounds and measured just 10 feet, 8 inches in length, small enough to be delivered by existing bomber aircraft. Heisenberg's group had long insisted that any atomic weapon would need specialized aircraft and technology that would not exist for decades. Dr. Carl Friedrich von Whittaker, Heisenberg's protégé, tried desperately to reverse engineer the American breakthroughs from the intercepted documents. His calculations revealed the scale of the United States industrial effort. The uranium processed at Oak Ridge alone exceeded Germany's total wartime supply by hundreds of times. The implosion lenses used in the American bombs required precision explosive manufacturing that integrated the expertise of both conventional weapons engineers and nuclear physicists, a collaboration that had never existed in Germany's isolated academic laboratories. Then came August 6, 1945. At 8:15 local time, the Enola Gay dropped Little Boy over Hiroshima. Within seconds, 5 square miles of the city vanished, and 80,000 people were killed instantly. German monitoring stations picked up the blast's seismic shock within hours, confirmation that the United States had successfully transitioned from testing to operational deployment. The strategic implications stunned German planners. While their doctrine focused on precision strikes against military targets, the Americans had embraced an entirely new philosophy of warfare, one of total annihilation. Atomic weapons were not designed for tactical advantage, they were designed to erase cities. 3 days later, on August 9th, the second bomb, Fat Man, detonated over Nagasaki at 11:02 a.m. The 3-day interval between bombings revealed the unthinkable: America had not just one weapon, but many, and the industrial capacity to continue producing them. Reports from Japanese sources described scenes of apocalyptic devastation, temperatures exceeding 7,000 degrees F, human beings vaporized, steel structures melted, and radiation rendering entire districts uninhabitable for weeks. For Germany's scientists, the implications were devastating. Everything they had believed, every theoretical assurance, every confident projection, was wrong. While they had spent years arguing over formulas and energy thresholds, America had built, tested, and deployed multiple atomic bombs that brought the Pacific War to an abrupt end. At Farm Hall in England, where 10 of Germany's leading physicists were being held after the war, British intelligence secretly recorded their reactions to the Hiroshima news. At first, they laughed, assuming it was Allied propaganda. Then came the radio reports, the technical details, the confirmation, and silence. Dr. Otto Hahn, whose 1938 discovery of nuclear fission had opened the door to the atomic age, was overcome with guilt. Upon realizing that his work had enabled the destruction of 2 cities, he suffered a severe breakdown, repeatedly declaring himself responsible for the deaths of thousands. His colleagues feared for his sanity in the days that followed. In the weeks after Japan's surrender, the German scientific community conducted its own post-mortem. The conclusions were brutal. Germany's atomic failure was not just the result of poor luck or limited resources, it was systemic. Bureaucratic rivalry had crippled collaboration. Short-sighted leadership had starved long-term research. And most catastrophically, the expulsion and persecution of Jewish scientists had driven the very minds that could have secured Germany's success into the arms of the enemy. By the time Little Boy fell on Hiroshima, the truth was inescapable: Germany's atomic program had died long before its war did, undone not by Allied bombs, but by its own arrogance, division, and blindness. The Trinity test shock, the legacy of Germany's atomic failure. In the months following Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the reputation of Germany's once great scientific community collapsed. International opinion turned sharply against those who had served the Nazi regime. The Allied scientific world, which had once admired Germany's theoretical achievements, now regarded its researchers as both incompetent and morally compromised. German physicists found themselves excluded from post-war conferences and denied collaboration in emerging international research programs. The strategic consequences of Germany's atomic failure soon became clear as the Cold War took shape. The United States, now holding an atomic monopoly, dominated global politics and military strategy for decades. German scientists realized, with bitter hindsight, that while they had been debating equations and energy thresholds, America had been building the weapons that would permanently reshape world power. By 1949, the Soviet Union, aided by captured German scientists and espionage from within the Manhattan Project, had conducted its first successful atomic test. The atomic age that Germany had initiated was now led by 2 superpowers who had learned from German mistakes and avoided its limitations. Decades later, Dr. Heinrich Vulkman's personal correspondence revealed the deep remorse felt by surviving German physicists. They had possessed the theoretical knowledge to change history, but lacked the industrial unity and political foresight to make that knowledge real. They came to understand a hard truth: knowing that atomic weapons were possible meant nothing without the capacity to build them. The failure of the German atomic program profoundly influenced post-war science policy. America's success proved that vast government investment and coordinated industrial collaboration could achieve what once seemed impossible. This realization gave birth to the era of big science. Massive state-backed research programs that would later propel humanity into space, advance computer technology, and revolutionize medicine. Historians now view Germany's atomic effort as a cautionary tale. Theoretical brilliance without practical execution, they note, is academically interesting but strategically irrelevant. The men who had unlocked the atom learned that knowledge without application is powerless in war. Ironically, the bombs that ended World War II were built using discoveries made by German scientists, but completed by German refugees working with American industry. That bitter irony haunted Vulkman, Heisenberg, and their peers for the rest of their lives. In the decades after the war, many of these same scientists helped rebuild Germany's scientific reputation, this time in peaceful pursuits. Vulkman, Heisenberg, and their colleagues turned their focus toward nuclear power and reactor design, applying their wartime expertise to civilian energy research under international supervision. Out of the ashes of failure, they finally achieved what they had once only imagined: the controlled, peaceful use of atomic energy. The declassification of the Farm Hall transcripts in 1992 transformed historical understanding of the German atomic effort. Secretly recorded by British intelligence in 1945, the conversations revealed that Germany's leading physicists had truly believed atomic weapons were impossible during the war, not that they had secretly sabotaged the Nazi program, as some post-war accounts claimed. Their failure had been intellectual, not moral defiance. Modern analyses of the program draw lessons that reach far beyond history. Nazi Germany's greatest mistake was treating atomic research as an academic competition rather than an industrial enterprise. The fragmented, ego-driven structure of its scientific establishment mirrored the bureaucratic dysfunction of the Reich itself. The result: a nation that led the world in theory, but failed utterly in practice. The so-called brain drain that crippled German science remains a warning for nations today. When governments suppress intellectual freedom or persecute talent, innovation migrates elsewhere. The Jewish physicists expelled between 1933 and 1939 didn't merely emigrate, they transferred Germany's atomic advantage directly to American laboratories. In his 1963 memoirs, Vulkman reflected that Germany's atomic defeat was rooted not in lack of genius, but in a philosophical misunderstanding of modern war. German scientists had sought elegant theoretical solutions, the Americans had pursued practical engineering backed by limitless resources. The Manhattan Project became the model for all future big science, from the Apollo missions to global computing networks. Today's nuclear and technological powers still operate under the lessons of Germany's failure. Nations seeking advanced weapons or technologies understand that theoretical insight alone is never enough. Success demands sustained industrial commitment, coordinated organization, and decades of disciplined development, precisely what Germany lacked between 1939 and 1945. For the surviving German scientists, that understanding carried a heavy moral weight. Having witnessed the destructive power born from their own discoveries, many became outspoken advocates for nuclear restraint and global arms control. Their warnings carried unique moral force, spoken by the very men who had opened the door to the atomic age, only to see others walk through it. Today, the former Kaiser Wilhelm Institute stands reborn as the Max Planck Institute, a symbol of international cooperation and peaceful research. In the very building where Dr. Vulkman once learned of America's atomic triumph, scientists from around the world now work together to expand knowledge for the benefit, not the destruction, of humanity. Germany's atomic story remains one of history's most profound ironies. The nation that first split the atom never built the bomb, yet its failure taught the world how to do both, and how never to repeat its mistakes.